The Zephyrian Council had spent 3 cycles perfecting what they considered their greatest achievement, the neural dissolution maze. It was not merely a physical labyrinth, but a cognitive trap designed to systematically dismantle the problem-solving capabilities of any sentient being unfortunate enough to enter it. The maze existed in 11 dimensions, its pathways constantly shifting according to the observer's own thought patterns, creating an endless feedback loop of confusion and despair. Dr. Vextar, the lead architect of this monstrosity, observed the human specimen through the quantum viewing array with barely contained excitement. The creature, designation Marcus Chen, had been captured during a routine scouting mission near the Tau Ceti system. Like all humans, he appeared woefully primitive, bipedal, carbon-based with laughably limited sensory organs and a brain that occupied a mere fraction of his cranial cavity. Subject exhibits no signs of distress, reported Junior Analyst Krieth, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she monitored the biometric readings. Heart rate remained steady at 72 beats per standard time unit. Vextar's tentacles writhed with anticipation. The maze had broken the minds of the galaxy's greatest intellects. The crystalline thought weavers of Proxima had lasted mere minutes before their consciousness shattered into fragments. The machine minds of the synthetic collective had experienced cascading logic failures within the first chamber. Even the enigmatic energy dancers of the void had found their ethereal forms trapped in recursive thought loops that lasted eons. But this human? This human was sitting cross-legged in the maze's central antechamber, methodically consuming what appeared to be a food item wrapped in some primitive organic material. "What is it doing?" Vexitar demanded, his confidence beginning to waver. "According to our cultural database, the human is eating lunch," Krieth replied, her voice uncertain. "The food item appears to be a sandwich, 2 pieces of processed grain matter containing various organic compounds." The human took another bite, chewed thoughtfully, and then stood up. Without apparent concern for the maze's reality-bending architecture, he began walking forward. The walls shifted around him, trying to confuse his spatial reasoning. Corridors that led east suddenly opened to the north. Passages that appeared solid became permeable, while empty air hardened into barriers. Marcus Chen seemed utterly unbothered. He finished his sandwich, crumpled the wrapper, and tossed it over his shoulder where it disappeared into a probability flux. Then he pulled out what the cultural database identified as a smartphone and began tapping at its surface. "Impossible," Vextar whispered. "The maze disrupts all forms of electronic communication. Quantum interference should render any primitive computational device useless." But the human continued tapping, occasionally pausing to look around as if getting his bearings. The maze responded by intensifying its assault on his consciousness. Gravity shifted at 90-degree angles. Colors that had no names in any known language blazed from the walls. The very concept of forward became meaningless as space folded in on itself. Marcus looked up from his phone, shrugged, and kept walking. "He's using the device as a compass," Krieth observed with growing amazement. "But that's impossible. The maze exists in 11 dimensions. No 3-dimensional navigation tool could possibly." "Update his psychological profile," Vextar commanded, his voice tight with frustration. "Perhaps his mind is too primitive to understand the maze's complexity. Sometimes ignorance can appear as resistance." The analysis took several minutes. When it completed, Krieth's eyes went wide with shock. "Sir, his IQ measures at 127 on the standard scale, above average for his species, but nothing extraordinary. However," she paused, reviewing the data again. "Sir, he's not actually using the phone as a compass." "Then what?" "He's playing a game. Something called Subway. Surfers." Vextar felt his consciousness recoil. The most sophisticated mental trap ever devised, a labyrinth that existed across 11 dimensions of reality, was being navigated by a creature playing a children's game on a primitive electronic device. Marcus had now reached the maze's second phase, where temporal paradoxes were supposed to trap visitors in loops of causality. The human paused, looked around at the impossible architecture where effect preceded cause and time flowed backwards in spirals, then pulled out another item from his lunch bag. Subject has produced an apple, Kriath reported weakly. He is eating it while walking through the temporal distortion field. The human's casual munching echoed through dimensions as he strolled past paradoxes that had driven entire civilizations to madness. When he finished the apple, he tossed the core into a causality loop where it began and ended its existence simultaneously. The maze shuddered at this casual violation of its carefully constructed logic. In the third phase, the maze attacked the visitor's sense of identity itself. Here the walls showed infinite reflections of possible selves, each one slightly different, designed to fragment the observer's consciousness across multiple probability states. The thought weavers had spent decades trying to reintegrate their scattered identities after experiencing this chamber. Marcus glanced at the reflections, saw versions of himself as a doctor, a farmer, a space pilot, an artist, and countless other possibilities. He nodded approvingly at one reflection where he appeared to be wearing a particularly nice suit, gave it a thumbs up, and continued walking. Subject shows no signs of identity dissociation, Kriath reported, her voice barely above a whisper. He appears to be encouraging his alternate selves. The final chamber was the maze's masterpiece, a space where logic itself became malleable, where mathematics contradicted itself, and where the fundamental laws of reason collapsed into chaos. No being had ever emerged from this chamber with their sanity intact. Marcus entered, looked around at the swirling chaos of illogic, and sat down on a bench that existed and didn't exist simultaneously. He pulled out the final item from his lunch, a thermos of coffee. As he sipped the coffee, he pulled out his phone again and began typing. The maze's sensors detected that he was composing a message in the primitive human communication system, known as texting. The message read, "Hey babe, gonna be a little late for dinner, stuck in this weird alien maze thing. Pretty cool though. Love you." He hit send. The message, impossibly, reached its destination across 11 dimensions and several star systems. Then Marcus stood up, finished his coffee, and walked straight to the maze's exit. A path that should have been impossible to find without solving 17 different multi-dimensional equations. When asked later how he had accomplished this feat, Marcus would shrug and say, "I don't know, man. I just followed the flow of air. There's always a breeze coming from the exit in places like this. Learned that from video games." The Zephyrian Council never used the neural dissolution maze again. It now serves as a human embassy, where Marcus works as a tour guide, giving daily presentations titled Basic Problem Solving for Overly Complicated Aliens. He still brings lunch to work every day,